This is the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
The biggest icon in podcasting.
Welcome in, everybody, to this week's edition of Doc and Jock. I am the Doc, John Macaroon, here today to recap one of the wildest Super Bowls we've seen in a minute. Did a head coach really not have his team prepared? What does it mean for the Lions that the Chiefs are a dynasty? 3 Super Bowl wins with Patrick Mahomes. It was crazy. It was a Super Bowl that many people enjoyed later on. Early on, man, it put many people to sleep regarding a defensive battle. I love defense. Everybody knows that. But for a Super Bowl, when you're eating, having a good time, maybe not the best to have a defensive battle. So we'll see. Get a reaction this week. We'll talk about how the Lions potentially are shaping up for 2024. Early mock drafts, early power rankings. People are talking about how the Detroit Lions fit. We got to ask the question, if the Lions do end up in New Orleans, which is a full circle moment for Dan Campbell and Aaron Glenn, who do you want staring back at the Lions? Do we want the man? Because everybody knows, to be the man, you got to beat the man. And in the second half of the podcast, we got to talk about Troy Weaver. He's trying to defend himself, but he's been given another opportunity to tear down the Pistons. He's now officially rebuilding the rebuild. And let's talk about what the hell he tried to accomplish. Here today, my guy Adam, the Jock Strozinski. Cuz, what did you make of the Super Bowl? Because it was a tough watch. For me, it was weird. And I think probably it has a lot to do with football burnout. This year, there was a lot more coverage of the Lions. I watched every game twice, checking out the division, checking out the opponents that maybe could be in the playoffs. So for me, by the time I got to the Super Bowl, it was just like blah. And I actually got more physical enjoyment focusing on the commercials than I did the game. By that point, I reached the finish line with the football season. And that's just the way it is. It was tough. It wasn't because the Lions weren't in it. I had no fatigue. I'm happy. I'm recovered from the Lions season. But I think I had football fatigue in regards to just having to cover football at that level. So I really didn't it was just kind of a game I watched, but I enjoyed the food I ate and I enjoyed watching the commercials. That's how I took in the Super Bowl. It was great to see a competitive edge, only the second game that went to overtime. And once it picked up, it definitely got more exciting. But emotionally, I was not invested in any kind of way at all.
Yeah, I'm in lockstep with you. And for me, it was because the Lions weren't there. It was because of what we seen 2 weeks prior. It was because the Lions had taken you on this journey and had gotten so close, basically to the doorstep, and then you were left holding the bag. This Super Bowl, going into it, I had zero anticipation to see it, which is like the first in forever. I had zero interest in really watching it. Like you said, I was more into the commercials, which I don't usually care about the commercials. But early on, at least, the commercials were the most entertaining part about this Super Bowl. I mean, this is only one of 2 Super Bowls, I believe, to ever get to overtime. But even all that being said, I feel like Jim Nantz and Tony Romo are like the most unlikable commentary duo. So like having them do your Super Bowl and then having them do a shit job explaining the overtime rules, which I'm going to be honest with you. We're going to talk about Kyle Shannahan a little bit later on. I was a little bit confused by the overtime rules. Alyssa was asking me questions and I was like, I think if it ends, it ends. Like they'll kick a field goal because like obviously they were in field goal range, but I was like, I don't think it just goes into a second one. I think when it's done, it's done. So like even I was a little bit confused. I feel like Jim Nantz and Tony Romo did a really shit job of explaining overtime. I feel like the broadcast itself with the commentary team, I thought they were very poor. I don't find them entertaining at all. I find watching the CBS games that they cover to be incredibly difficult to get through. And I don't know if you want to call it a defensive battle. I just thought it was sloppy football. I feel like early on, it was a very sloppy game. The offenses really couldn't get going. It really felt like everything was stagnated, and it was just kind of blown opportunity or missed chance for these offenses. And then the game kind of opened up a little bit, but really when you look at it, did it really open up all that much? I mean, how many touchdowns were scored? You can count all the touchdowns that were scored basically on one hand. It was a lot of field goals that were kicked in this game. So to me, this was one of the more boring Super Bowls that we have witnessed in a long time. And getting through, I want to say probably about halfway through it, I had looked at Alyssa and I was like, I feel like this, where we're at right now, justifies all of my feelings that I had 2 weeks ago when the Lions were busy basically shitting the bed and rolling around in it. When the Lions were essentially one defensive stop or one offensive play away from making it to the Super Bowl. Halfway through this game, I felt like if the Lions were there, I felt like the Lions were winning the Super Bowl. And this game really and truly didn't do anything to dissuade that. Yeah, Patrick Mahomes had a really good second half, but I feel like the Lions, like I said, going into halftime, I was thumping my chest. I was like, if the Lions were here, they were absolutely winning this. And I seen Antonio Brown felt the same exact way. To me, I don't know if the Chiefs ever get back in this game if the Lions are playing this game. And I think that was my biggest takeaway from this Super Bowl, is that your Detroit Lions are on this stage. Your Detroit Lions are now a contender for the biggest prize in football. Your Detroit Lions should have been there. And honestly, when we break it down, like look deep within your heart, they probably should have won this game. But again, they didn't make it there. But what I took out of this Super Bowl, the biggest thing that I came away with saying is the Detroit Lions belong with these groups that we talk about playing for the Super Bowl. And if the Lions played in this Super Bowl, I feel like in my heart of hearts, they were winning it. What was your biggest takeaway from this Super Bowl?
No, absolutely. It just my takeaway was obviously what would it take for the Detroit Lions to win this game? And I know everybody was saying, oh, this Detroit Lions team was going to win. In that first half, yeah, they would have had a 14-3 lead. Or maybe 17-3, 20-3. Doesn't matter. You know what my takeaway would be? As long as Patrick Mahomes is breathing and healthy, you saw 4th and 1, no doubt, boom, easy, no doubt, 3 yards run, mobile, smooth. The parting of the sea happens. He makes the plays, and he makes it look easy. And you realize, wait a minute, the Kansas City Chiefs were supposed to have a down year. They moved on from Tyreek Hill. Technically, could you imagine if the Lions moved on from Amon-Ra St. Brown? Are you expecting them to go back-to-back and win Super Bowls? So, and I think where a lot of people would love it, and one day maybe if at the Combine, I'll see if somebody will ask it, I'm wondering if there's another Patrick Mahomes in the draft. Because look, in my opinion, all due respect to Jared Goff, but there's a ceiling, and you got to do a lot of work to surround him with talent to get to that Super Bowl. And look, you can do it. Obviously, Matthew Stafford did it, but in the end, you got to time it just right, and you got to have everything fall your way. But no, what would have happened was you would have had the ultimate heartbreak, because guess what would have happened? The light switch would have came on. Travis Kelce would have choke-slammed Andy Reid, and then they would have scored 4 touchdowns in a row.
What did you make of that? So, what did you make of that dust-up that Travis Kelce and Andy Reid had?
When you're the world champs, you can do whatever the fuck you want to do. You can go out there and point the finger at each other. I mean, you got Patrick Mahomes finger-waving at Rashee Rice. You got the football team is unbelievably competitive, and you recognize that when you have a group led by Patrick Mahomes, he's a Michael Jordan type. He's a Tiger Woods. He's a guy that's like, I won 2 Super Bowls, great. I want 3. Great, I won 3 Super Bowls, I want 4, 5. I mean, you're talking about rarefied
He's chasing Tom
people.
Brady right now. He is chasing Tom Brady. Like everything that Tom Brady has amassed over his career, he is basically dialed in and he says, I want all of that. Whatever Tom Brady has, I want one more. Yes. And that's what he's going for. That is what he is chasing. And I think that's great. It makes for entertaining football. Like we got to grow up and we got to watch Tom Brady basically go out there and do it better than anybody else. I don't know about you, but for me as a kid growing up, I loved Joe Montana.
Yes.
That was the guy that Tom Brady idolized. Then we got to watch Tom Brady come and basically put a clinic on. And Tom Brady just light up all of the stats sheets, all of the scores, light up everything. And now you're getting to watch Patrick Mahomes basically take on that role. The next decade of football, as long as Patrick Mahomes stays healthy, it should be incredibly interesting because he has a list and he's just checking stuff off. Like, what did Tom do? What did Tom do? How much closer am I? How many more do I got to get to surpass him? It's going to be very, very interesting to watch Patrick Mahomes over the next, we'll say, 10 years or so. Should be fantastic football. And look, as long as you have Patrick Mahomes, you're always going to be in contention.
Yeah, and that's what's crazy is that the Lions only beat the Chiefs by 1 without Chris Jones and Travis Kelce. So you realize the competitive nature, the toughness that it would have represented. I don't want to see the Chiefs. Look, if it's the Lions and the Chiefs, unless there's a major injury to the Chiefs, you got to think that the Lions are underdogs. And you just realize, bro, it might have been the Chiefs winning the Super Bowl might have been the easiest bet ever made. Plus money, if you would have bet 100, you would have got 205 back. The casinos lost their ass because for some reason they decided to make the 49ers the favorites. Are you freaking kidding me? Some bean counters got to get their ass fired from Vegas because the majority of the public looked at it and said, huh? I can get plus money on the Chiefs? $100, I get 205 back?
Well, I think if you look at it, though, the better team, at least on paper, the better team was the 49ers. You're right when you make the comparison that Patrick Mahomes is essentially the Michael Jordan of football right now. So as long as you have arguably the best player, again, this goes best team versus best player. As long as you have arguably the best player in the game right now, a guy who impacts the game on every offensive play as your quarterback in Patrick Mahomes, you're going to have a shot. I don't have an issue with what the odds makers did. I think, again, you're looking at it as team compared to individual, and they decided to go team.
But at the same time, you say, okay, in football terms, what would you kind of look at as comparison? I think Andy Reid is better than Kyle Shanahan by a point, and then I think +2 goes to Mahomes over Purdy. So in that sense, you get a great equalizer. I just think that for the most part, I think it should have been at most. I would have actually, if I looked at it, I would have said that the Chiefs are the favorite. They're a good football team. The way they played, they beat the AFC, basically one of the best teams in the AFC. And I know that the Lions got there and the 49ers handled business, but you saw that the 49ers had holes that could easily be exploited. And I think that the defense of the Chiefs got way underrated. So for me, seeing that game, I just think that the Chiefs have the ability with Mahomes at any time to turn on the switch and play at a high level. And basically, Travis Kelce was going to will that football team to a victory. So for me, if the Lions get to the big dance next year in New Orleans, I don't want to be staring at Patrick Mahomes because it's true, and many people are saying it. Mahomes is going to keep a lot of people from winning Super Bowls. Now, it's going to be ultra tough. You might have a tough time, but you realize this was supposed to be a down year for the Chiefs. They can maneuver money around now, add more talent. You recognize the young talent that they got. You know they're going to want to try and three-peat. So maybe you catch them at the right time, but, man, it's going to be incredibly tough moving forward when you recognize just how hungry. To me, I'm wondering, cuz, how egregious was Kyle Shanahan's mistake in overtime? Because it feels like to me that, in the way I'm looking at it, Kyle Shanahan reminds me of Andy Reid. I think he's going to struggle with one team. Maybe he goes to another, but he's going to get 2 or 3 Super Bowls. The man can flat-out coach offense, and the thing is he's got to work through a couple of these game planning things that he just kind of has a hard time closing the deal. I looked at it. I thought the man was 55 years old. I typed in Kyle Shannahan because I was curious. The man's my age. He's only 44 years old. 44! And he's already been to 3 Super Bowls, 1 as a coordinator, 2 as a coach. Oh, my God. He's going to do some great things. And it might be tough with the 49ers, but that man has a bright future. I see big things. And I don't discount that the 49ers are just going to fade by the wayside. It's going to be incredibly tough for the Lions to get back. And I think that round 1, I don't think Kyle Shanahan outcoached Dan Campbell. I think that Dan Campbell has a lot to learn. But at the same time, I definitely would love to see it again, a rivalry between the Lions and the 49ers. And to get over that hump, to get to the Super Bowl, I would love to beat the 49ers again. Because there's a chance, based on what you saw, that if the Lions build their defense, they can compete in the NFC, which doesn't scare a lot of people. That's the tough part, is I think people get this false bravado that if the Lions would have got to the Super Bowl this year, that they accomplished something. The NFC is kind of down. And compared to what you got in the AFC, if you had to get through Josh Allen, you got to get through Tua and Miami, and they're restocking and retooling. You got to get through Mahomes and now Lamar Jackson, who's hungry and getting called a bust. Oh, my God. Winning the NFC is good, but it doesn't have the cachet as it does to get out of the AFC, in my mind. So beat the 49ers, handle your business, beat Shanahan, but I think Dan Campbell's on the level of Kyle Shanahan right now. Don't you think?
Yeah, I think so. I think, look, if you asked me which coach would I rather have, I think I'm going to go with Dan Campbell. The one thing that you forgot when you were describing Kyle Shanahan, those 3 times that he played in a Super Bowl or that he coached in the Super Bowl, those were some of the biggest losses for teams. The biggest comebacks were against his offense, and then 2 times they were against his team. Now, yeah, look, he's faced Tom Brady, and then he's faced Patrick Mahomes in both of those. And we just talked about how those are arguably 2 of the greatest quarterbacks to ever play the game. So I get it, and it's all in context. But look, I think Dan Campbell is going to learn a ton from this season. And I think Dan Campbell has learned a ton so far. Remember, Dan Campbell had very minimal coaching experience coming in, and you've seen a dramatic improvement from year 1 to year 2. From year 2 to year 3, he was able to get this team 30 minutes away from playing in this game. I would take Dan Campbell all day. Now, as far as Kyle Shanahan's decision to take the ball in overtime, I don't necessarily have a problem with it. I think the rules for overtime are a little bit convoluted, and I get where Kyle Shanahan was going. He said, I'm going to take the ball first, and that way I'm playing for the 3rd possession. That was essentially what he did. He said, I'm going to take the ball first, and I'm going to trust my defense to at least hold these guys to a field goal. That was what he was saying. He basically put it on his defense, and his defense failed him. And so if they hold him to the field goal, it's basically next point wins. It all of a sudden becomes sudden death. So he's playing for sudden death is what he's doing. They went down, they scored a field goal, take the lead, and then he's putting it on his defense to say, look, guys, all you got to do is just keep them out of the end zone. Keep them out of the end zone. We're going to get the ball back. We're going to go win this thing. And the defense crumbled. I don't necessarily have a problem with what he did. I think the bigger issue comes in with some of the in-game management that he had, and I think bigger issues come in with not necessarily getting your team on the same page. Now, the coaching staff seemed to understand the new overtime rules, obviously much better than myself, and it really seemed like much better than Tony Romo and Jim Nantz. But it didn't sound like his team necessarily understood the rules. And I think there's a bit of a coaching philosophy difference there when you hear the players come out for the Chiefs compared to what you hear coming out of the 49er camp. And it sounds like the Chiefs were totally prepared for this. They like had installs for this particular situation, whereas the 49ers did not. The coaching staff knew the analytics, knew a lot of different information, but it didn't really sound like they passed that along to their players. And I think that would have helped. I think that would maybe given you a little bit of a mindset change, a little bit of a different mentality, different edge there. But all that being said, at this moment in time, I want Dan Campbell. I've seen his level of growth over the last couple of seasons. I like the fact that his team buys in. I like the fact that this was a man who was 30 minutes away from getting this team to a Super Bowl. And this is a guy who you can debate it all you want. Did he make mistakes? Should he have took the points? Whatever. We did that show. We've done that. That's old news. All right. We're moving on. We're leaving that where it lies in the past. Okay. This is a guy who the team, whether you believed he screwed up or not, rallies around their head coach and says, this guy knows what he's doing. This is the guy we want to play for. And to me, that is a huge, huge deal. On top of that, Dan Campbell looks like a guy you just want to drink a beer with and maybe get into a bar fight with, because I feel like he's got 3 dudes tier 1. Kyle Shanahan, I feel like, is getting poked in the eye and he's crying somewhere. So I want Dan Campbell. Kyle Shanahan has blown 3 Super Bowls that he's been in and hasn't been able to get the deal done. I'm going to ride with my guy, Dan Campbell. Do you think that Kyle Shanahan will ever get to that point where he wins the Super Bowl? Because at this point, it really feels like he's going to be a guy who may forever and a day be on the outside looking in. I know you compared him to an Andy Reid, where maybe one day he'll leave the 49ers and he'll go coach another team and maybe he'll eventually get it done. But right now, it really feels like the Super Bowl is the biggest obstacle for this man to overcome, and I don't believe he ever gets it done.
Really?
Yeah.
No, I disagree. I think that he gets it done. I think that when you look at it, you get that many cracks, you start learning things. Because here's what he just learned. He learned now that
playing Patrick Mahomes sucks.
No, Andy Reid was going to go for 2. He realized, oh shit, that playing for the third possession is pointless because now you realize that you would have had a situation in which, you know what, next time around you defer so that you know what you need to do. And in the end, he would have, I think that not having that strategy down packed because it's new, it made it so that he was pretty much okay with kicking the field goal, not being aggressive. Whereas Andy Reid, the chess master, is like, boom, now we know, boom, we go ultra aggressive, we know what we got to do, and we go down and we just execute flawlessly. So next time around, you recognize too, Brock Purdy will get better. You realize too that maybe one more year with CMC, you got to retool a little bit. But it may not happen with the 49ers, but the man's 44 years old. If he coaches with that lineage, come on, man. It's unbelievably tough, and it's a Mahomes era. There might be a year where you don't get Mahomes. You realize eventually that I think that what's going to happen is Mahomes has another chance to get one next year. Mm-hmm. Then there'll be a dip while the Chiefs kind of retool and figure things out, maybe a 1 or 2 year lull. That might be the window for Shanahan. And then when Mahomes hits 31, 32, forget about it. He'll get 1 or 2 more. And I don't think he's going to break Brady's record. I think he'll tie it. I think 6 or 7 might be the number. It might fall short. It might get tougher. You never know with injuries and stuff like that, and how teams are going to progress. You never know if Andy Reid, eventually retires. Does he stay till 70, 5 more years? We'll see. Yeah. But I do think Kyle Shanahan's got it. I mean, he's got everything you need. He knows the game. He knows the game of offense. It's just those finer points in those big games. It sucks because right now all the headlines are he's a choke artist. I mean, my God, I get it but unfortunately he's got to get better at the other side of the ball. And that was crazy in terms of Steve Wilks. You can't have those situations where it's 4th and 1. I think the whole world knew that Mahomes was keeping the ball. I think you should have sold out.
You got to put a spy on him or something.
Yeah, you sell out. You just come all 10 guys up to the line, and Nick Bosa bit, man, that was a bad bite and one of the rare mistakes that he made. You saw that play, right? And you saw, oh my God, 4th and 1. If they would have ended there, if they would have just brought the house, in the end, if you get fooled, but in the end, Mahomes could have pulled the ball down and found probably 4 guys open in that situation. It's just so tough in regards to being able to win a Super Bowl.
This is the thing that I don't really think we're talking about enough from this game. And really there's 2 things, right? One is defensively, San Francisco loses arguably their best player. Was it Dre Greenlaw? It ends up blowing his Achilles out, and that's a huge deal. That's a monster deal. Your defense is built around that guy. And it's weird to see a defense now built around a linebacker, but he does so much more than just being a linebacker. So you lose a key piece on defense, and I don't think that's been highlighted enough or talked about enough, because I think that changes some of what you can do defensively to stop Patrick Mahomes. I think that changes what you can do defensively to kind of keep a guy like Kelsey under wraps. You notice Kelsey didn't really explode for anything until the second half. And to me, it was the offense making those adjustments and the defense not being able to keep up with it. And when you lose a player like that, I think that becomes incredibly tough for your defense. On top of that, with this Kansas City Chiefs team, this is a Kansas City Chiefs team that went from being pretty much purely offensive to now being a very defensive-minded team. You are watching a team basically reinvent itself on the fly. So I don't think we're giving enough credit to that. Like, yeah, Patrick Mahomes did a lot of great things, but the real reason this team was good this year was their defense. Their defense kept them in a lot of games. And I don't feel like we're giving enough credit to that Chiefs defense and what they've been able to do. Because, yeah, Patrick Mahomes goes out, he can win the MVP, he can do all these things, throw 1,000,001 footballs and do a ton of stuff. But their defense is what kept them in this game, and their defense is what stymied the 49ers at times and really helped Patrick Mahomes get the ball back and get those possessions. So I think it's really two minor stories that really should be a little bit more major, to very macro things that kind of occurred in this game and for Kansas City really throughout the season that were much more macro when you kind of drill down and look into it. It was the loss of Greenlaw, and then it was the Kansas City defense really coming up big. And again, this team reinventing itself from going from this offensive juggernaut to this team that can play knockout, bludgeon you defense and stop you when they have to. I think it's really, really interesting to really kind of dive in and kind of pull those things out and just kind of watch how different things impacted this game, because this game was, to me, incredibly boring to start, but then it did ramp up in that second half.
It sure did, man. It was wild to see, the 49ers have no answers. Then did you hear Hardman? Hardman didn't even know that he got a Super Bowl win. He's got in the end zone, put his arms up, and he's all of a sudden the game's over. And I think there was some.
It was like the most anticlimactic ending.
Yeah,
because I don't think anybody understood the rules. These were brand new rules for overtime. I was kind of like when that happened, I was like, so is the game over now? And it was over. I mean, like the Chiefs coaching staff knew, but I don't really think anybody else really knew. It was weird.
Very weird. And you look at it, and like you said, you got Tony Romo taking it because a lot of people are like, hey, you didn't even give Nance a chance to be able to express himself. You're just talking over him. And everybody said it too. I thought it was a layup. All you had to do was be quiet. Let the moment speak for itself. And you can see a video online where it shows, the way in which the production was excellent. You go to the scene, you go back, and it just would have been perfect if Tony Romo would have just been quiet. And I think a lot of people were posting, can we edit Tony out of this video? Because it would have been so much better with Tony not talking. And it was like, man, you're not supposed to climb all over your number one. And you're absolutely right. The Nance-Romo pairing fell way short, and it was panned all over the interwebs in regards to their pairing and how they did. And it's unfortunate because the game was at a very high level. And even CBS made a mistake in a graphic, I think, in the third quarter in terms of calling it a second down when it was already a first. And it confused many people. And a bunch of rednecks on TikTok were going, hey, wait a minute, there's a conspiracy theory. And then they had to get more context that actually CBS had the graphic wrong in the third quarter. So it's just, come on. You can do so much better in regards to when 200 million people are watching a game to have it down crisp. But hey,
you know what I'd like to see?
What'd you like to see?
I'd love to see Greg Olsen.
Yes.
Join Jim Nance. I think that would be a really interesting pairing with Tom Brady basically removing him from Fox. Yeah. Greg Olsen goes and removes Tony Romo. Tony Romo has been. He was cool the first year he came out. After that, man, he's got to hear himself talk. He's got to talk over Nance. Nance already. I don't like Nance. Nance really isn't my cup of tea. Nance is good for golf, and that's about it. I don't need Nance for football. It just doesn't work for me. So you put Greg Olsen with him, I think it'd be that much better. Maybe they actually have some chemistry because those two boobs have zero chemistry, and I don't even think they like each other.
All right, switching gears. Before we talk about Pistons, because I want to delay that as much as possible because that's just like getting an enema. It's like, I got to talk about it.
You don't like getting kicked in the dick? Is that what you're telling me?
Not as much as this. Did you see the crazy-ass shit that was going down at the Waste Management tournament? The Waste Management Open was like some old school festival. Like it turned into Woodstock. And I'm reading now it sold a record-breaking 4,209,328 alcoholic beverages. You had, and I am not kidding. If you're not a guy that's online a lot, and I'm not exaggerating, you had videos, 1, of a dude swimming in a sand trap, 2, a dude pissing in a chair, 3, mudslide central, 4, Zach Johnson going, will you guys please shut the fuck up and stop trolling me about how shitty I was at the Ryder Cup? You had Jordan Spieth being like, what the fuck? I'm in the swing, guys. And you had another guy be like, guys, you cannot chant and cheer when in the middle of a guy's backswing. Now, I'm totally conflicted because that shit sounds like fucking fun. I'm like, I got to talk to Adam. We got to fucking go out there. But I think it jumped the shark in 2024 because all that shit turned into chaos. Mm-hmm. And they literally, it was so chaotic. If you didn't read about it, people just showed up there 5,000 more people than were allocated. They had to be like, what the hell? We have to close the doors for people that actually had tickets on Saturday. Yeah. Beer sales had to be stopped. It was the definition of a shit show.
Multiple times.
Now, I'm all for a good party in the right place. You know what I'm thinking? They need to do an exhibition where you have it at that golf course, but not a professional tournament. Like, there's got to be, like, it doesn't exactly fit the mantra of golf to have drunk-ass people all over the place. And I'm not being a party pooper because I'd love to see it. I think they need to have an exhibition where you get the golfers that like it, like a Max Homa, Jordan Spieth, Justin Thomas, and just have a fun 18-hole experience where people can party, have music, but not pay guys millions of dollars, because it literally ended up being a shit show full of drunk people. There are stats like arrests were up 400%. You had like at least like 200 people kicked out of the venue. You had these poor 50-year-old volunteers trying to chase drunk-ass people. Look, I'm not trying to be this party pooper, but in my mind, that's not really what golf is about. I think it got out of hand a little bit. It's fun to watch. It's fun to see all the videos, but I don't think a golf tournament that has now become synonymous with getting shit-faced is going to continue in that way. But man, it sounds like a fun Saturday to get out there and go crazy apeshit on a golf course.
So this is one of the wildest golf events of the year. This event is historically crazy. And I think it's the 17th hole is basically where everybody kind of parties in this upper terrace like venue where you can kind of look down, and usually parts of it is just littered with beer cans, and it's just normal. You know, when you go to the Waste Management Classic, this is what you're getting. This was excessive though. Normally this event is, I don't know, like on an 8.5, on a 9. This was a 14 this year. It was absolutely bonkers, and I don't know what they can do to kind of stop it, prevent it, to really dial it back. I think you're right. It maybe did jump the shark this year. Obviously, there was a ticket malfunction. That's why there were so many more people there. They had to stop beer sales multiple times through this event because people were just so intoxicated and were just hot messes. This was an absolutely wild experience. I don't know if you watch I think it's called Full Swing. It's on Netflix. It basically follows certain groups of guys around from the PGA. This was their first event for this year's documentary with it.
They taped it?
I can't wait for it to come out, because this like just to see what the players have to say about this. Like, obviously they were upset and they were not happy, but like this was absolutely crazy. I don't know what they're going to be able to do to kind of curve this, because that was the whole thing about this event. This is supposed to be the big one, the big rowdy party. Most of the time you go to a golf event, there's a little bit more prestige. There's a little bit more just kind of keeping your shit together. Like, you go, you have a good time, but you're not, it's not this bash. It's not this monster party like this was, or this is. So I don't know how they dial it back, and I don't know how they fix it, but I can't wait to watch this on Full Swing when it comes out later on this year. I think it's going to be fantastic.
It's crazy. Do you think they're going to make changes? Do you think it can be like this? Because
I don't think you can have it like this anymore. Like, I think it can still be a party, but I think there has to be some guardrails, because you can't have as many fights as you had. You can't have as many drunk people as you had. You can't have guys ruining the course, and you can't have multiple delays that last hours for them to basically clean greens so you can go make putts. Like, you can't have that. It disrupts everything. And you're a golfer. I'm a golfer. We're not very good. You are better than me. But you know, when you're playing and you get in a little bit of a rhythm and you start making some shots, this can help you win a championship. This can help you win a monster payday. And if you're going to get derailed because they got to clean off a green because Timmy and Johnny are hammered and are throwing all their beer cans all over it, you just can't have that. Like, that just can't be a part of an actual PGA event. So changes are going to have to be made. This was excessive. Usually I'm all about the good time. This was a little bit much, a little bit outside the line, outside my comfort zone.
It was wild. It was actually, it could have been unsafe too. I mean, you got a dude literally jumping in the sand trap. That's a little bit much. You got to have a little more security. And unfortunately, they're probably going to beef up too, because 60-year-old volunteers are not going to be chasing these kids with cell phones and people that are really completely out of control. And you really feel bad. You're like, wait a minute, there are people that actually had tickets that they couldn't get inside the building because they couldn't get inside the golf course because it was so rowdy that they had to probably refund a lot of people. And that is a lot of beer sales. You know, it's basically the biggest Saturday party of the year on a golf course, and it's wild. So we'll see how they respond to it. And it's unfortunate that you recognize that maybe cell phones and the coverage of it gets too big and too out of control. And I don't think it'll be like that moving forward. There's no way the golfers are going to be like, yeah, I want guys talking during my swing and trolling me and things like that. There has to be a little bit of decorum in the golf world and things like that. And maybe you just do it for the pro-am. You do a special situation where that's what it is, and you got to limit the beer sales on Saturday and Sunday. But here's the problem. The big sponsors are the beer companies, and Waste Management seems to like it. They seems to they're starting to like they're reveling in the fact that this is wild. So we'll see how it plays out moving forward. It might take a public situation in which someone says something in order for it to change, but we'll see moving forward. All right, speaking of Waste Management, Troy Weaver
Great segue.
tried to clean up his mess and traded a bunch of people. And look, I didn't think that it was as extreme as people made it, where they said that some felt like he didn't have a plan. He had a plan. Unfortunately, it isn't what many would expect, because in essence, you just unloaded a lot of guys that are not going to be part of the future, and you brought back guys that you think can potentially fit. And that's at least a start. But are these guys going to be part of a world championship team? No. You got two guys, maybe, two more that can maybe surround the core of Ivy, Cunningham, and Duran. And you recognize Tech 19 has maybe a game that people will like. 20 points, made a splash in his first debut. People will like his game. So maybe he'll be a fit. But you recognize moving forward, it's really hard. And look, we don't fashion ourselves as being experts at basketball, but we can see what we can see. That Troy Weaver put together a basketball team that didn't fit. And the fact that he was given carte blanche to tear it down again and will have all this cap space, because there's no other way to say it, but I'm petrified. I'm petrified that now in February, we're staring at an offseason where Troy Weaver is going to have an opportunity. He's going to, by all accounts, I'm not hearing whispers he's getting fired. I screamed from the heavens that this is not going to work. But okay, I'm scared he's going to have all this cap space, all this opportunity to retool this team again. And you're talking about 4 years right now. And here you go. If you mess up this, you're now talking about a decade of the Pistons being irrelevant. So I'm really nervous that the Pistons are staring at a rebuild. At least you realize, okay, he fell into three players that are solid, Ivy, Cunningham, and Duran. That's a core. But the next five guys you surround them with have to hit. And right now, my approval rating of Troy Weaver is at 2%. And some good questions were asked regarding why do you feel like you're the guy? I just don't sense the way in which he speaks publicly does not portray any level of confidence to me that the Pistons are going to be serious. And here's what sucks, cuz. Here's what stinks when you, and it really applies to everything in life. If you got passed up by Orlando quickly, you got passed up by Houston pretty quickly, you got passed up by Cleveland pretty quickly, are you going to make up ground that fast this offseason with what you got? No, I don't think so. And so you're trying to fight just to be mediocre. You got to remember, Orlando's really young too, and they're going to get better, and they're going to add. Houston, they're going to add. You realize the West has a super team with the Clippers. You realize other teams are going to do that as well. So for me, it just felt like really it was a teardown, but going to use cheap parts to try and retool it. You're not going out and getting the prime wood. You're not getting the prime concrete. You're just going out there and saying, oh yeah, shit, we got to tear this house down. You found a great way to bulldoze it, but you brought all the cheap parts again to try and build a home that's going to fall apart again. That's how I look at it.
I feel like if you're a Detroit Pistons fan, this is like the scariest time because you just witnessed what Troy Weaver can do. and it's not a whole lot of anything good, right? He's a guy who got to come in and basically they gave him all the tools in the world. He had the first overall draft pick, and thankfully he hit on that. But this guy had a ton of draft capital. He had money for cap space to go out and sign guys, and he put a team together, and it's failed miserably. And now they're saying, go ahead, trade it all the way. Trade it all the way and start over. And this is the rebuild to the rebuild. A lot of general managers never get this opportunity. Most, if any, general managers ever get this opportunity with the same team. He's getting to do this with the same team. His first ever draft pick, he just released. He was like, go. I can't do anything with you. And I don't even know if Killian Hayes has been re-signed or picked up by anybody. He's probably in the G League somewhere. I mean, that's how bad of a job this guy did. And now you're trusting him to rebuild it again. And you're right, there is a core. But I don't have any faith in this front office. I don't have any faith in this owner. I have zero faith in this team to do anything. And yeah, look at the moves that he made. Where does this get you? Does this get you from maybe 9 wins this year, maybe 10 wins this year, to 22 wins next season, maybe high-end 32 wins? What's a 32-win team in this league? You're nothing. You're missing the playoffs. You're not getting in. And this isn't one of those leagues where you can get in as like an 8th seed and really make a run. That's not how this league works. You really need to be somewhere in the top to even get a little bit hot and go on a tear. I see nothing. I see nothing with this team. You have a head coach who doesn't look like he wants to be here. You've got a head coach who basically walked onto this team and was like, I can't do anything with these guys. They don't fit my offense. He's like, I need 3-point shooters. And you have a bunch of pick and roll guys, pick and pop guys, nobody who can really hit the outside shot. I think the most candid thing Troy Weaver said in his press conference was, yeah, I could have got more last year for Bojanovic, but we're not talking about last year. We're talking about this year. Like, oh, okay, cool. Because everybody was screaming to trade him last year when you could have got something. You have no draft capital. You have no first-round picks. Like, the Knicks have all of your first-round picks. You will have some cap space because you just traded away so many guys, and you got so many guys in return. At one point, you had 18 guys on your roster. You had to just cut guys to get to the league maximum. You took on so much dead weight just so you could try to free up cap space for next year. But does anybody trust you to do anything good with it? I can give a gun to a baby and load it. Is that a smart idea? No, it's absolutely not. That's basically what's going on with Troy Weaver here. He's the baby, and they're giving him a loaded gun. They're saying, here, go ahead, do it again. Let's see what you do. It's absolutely stupid. You know, honestly, if you had an owner who was not asleep at the wheel, who was not out in California doing whatever he's doing, if you had an owner who actually gave a damn and cared about this team, it would be different. But your owner doesn't care. So why the hell should I care? Because I don't care. I can't stand the Pistons. I'm so frustrated with them. Troy Weaver is absolute a horse's ass. Tom Gores is even worse than that. Like, I have to bite my tongue because I'll get us in trouble if I say what I want to say. It's sad to see the Pistons in this state. And you know what I feel bad for? I feel bad for those players you named. I feel bad for Cade Cunningham. I feel bad for Jaden Ivey. I feel bad for Jalen Duren. Those are the guys I feel bad for because, unfortunately, you are here on this sinking ship, and there's not enough Band-Aids, duct tape, floorboards. There's not enough nails or screws to try to patch all the holes in this boat as it sinks. And you guys are basically being captained by one of the worst general managers in the league with an owner who's too busy to give a shit about what's going on with his own team. It's incredibly frustrating. And I think for the future, if you're looking at the future of this franchise, it seems like Troy Weaver will be back, able to do this all again. Honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if coming out of this, the guy gets a 4-year extension just so he can see his second rebuild get redone. I mean, what sense does that make when your 7th overall pick from your first draft, you just let go? You just say, you're released. We can't do anything with you. And you come out and you basically say, yeah, we could have got more last year for for our best guy that we traded away. But we're talking about this year, and you're bringing in guys and then just releasing them to try to maximize some cap space for the following year because you have no draft capital. Like, these are all horrible things. Nobody's going to want to come in and be the general manager of this team. On top of that, you're letting this guy try to navigate this storm that he's created. It's a very bleak future for the Detroit Pistons.
Yeah, it's the best way to put it. You don't feel confidence. Like, you can sense it. You know when they say because success leaves clues? Disasters leave clues. We've seen disasters. And you know what's crazy? And I know now I'm definitely sports addicted. I watched last night, and it's crazy. We record this a couple days before Thursday. You know what pops up? Obviously, all the podcasts pop up, like McAfee, Adam Carolla. And lately, because I've been going back and listening to Matt Patricia and all the crazy excuses he tried to make to try and see how coaches explain away losses and terribleness, I watched 45 minutes of Bob Quinn trying to explain away a 6-10 season and using every cliche in the book. I sat there and watched it last night, and I was like, oh my God, we got to upgrade. I'm so mad we're not in the postseason. We got to get more high-end players. And I was just like, oh my God, this is never going to work. And I probably remember having that feeling when I was sitting there listening to him bloviate about trying to get better. And the one question, though, I loved was him trying to defend Stafford. And you know who was there blasting him away with examples and follow-ups? Caputo. It was great. He was like, Matthew Stafford has done this before in 15 and done it before in 17 and da-da-da. And then Bob Quinn gives a soliloquy on why he likes it. And then right away, the next thing is Pat again going, but you recognize that this has happened so many times before that he had a good game the first couple weeks, and then he had the Seattle game where he had 3 interceptions. This is what you get with this quarterback. And Bob had to dance and squirm. And it was so different to hear someone just challenge someone directly to his face. It was like refreshing. But at the same token, you recognize that Troy Weaver is probably in a position he doesn't belong in. And it's unfortunate because it has real consequences to a team that you couldn't even get a first-round pick for the guy that was your best player. Yeah, he doesn't play defense. And I know Bojan Bogdanovic is an older player, but you might have had a chance to get that last year, and you probably got him at a market price that was maybe below what you could have got him for, and that's not being original. And I think here's what I think you're starting to sense is Troy Weaver is average at his job. He can put together talent, but not at the degree in which you got to be sharp and finagle teams and sometimes take advantage of teams to get what you need, and you don't see that. Like, you basically got to give him the number 1 pick and let him pick the best player, and he can put together. He got 3 guys that are okay, but after that, in terms of did he make any shrewd free agent moves? No. He figured out a way that he wanted to test out, and which is weird is, why would you go with reclamation projects? If the Golden State Warriors don't like Weissman, you think the Pistons are going to get a diamond in the rough? It doesn't work like that. You recognize you picked, right from the get-go, your first pick is Killian Hayes. You waive him. You get nothing for him. That's a first-round pick. You don't get to just throw those away. It doesn't work in the National Basketball Association. You just said, well, his shooting sucks. Well, everybody saw that his shooting sucked pretty fast. Why didn't you see that? So that's where it just sucks, is that you don't feel like Troy Weaver is ahead of the game. You feel like he's treading water and eventually going to take on so many holes that the ship is going to sink. So we'll see if he gets the opportunity. We'll see if he was just told, hey, make it work till we get to where we need to go, and they're going to fire him. We'll see. We'll see if he actually survives it. There's still a chance. I don't know if he's going to end up surviving it. Maybe he'll end up being the fall guy. But we'll see as the season goes on, because when the season ends, he's going to have to answer for a 12-win season. And it's unfortunate when you look at it that Monty Williams needs to be told to play Ivy more. Like, dude, you're supposed to be the best of the best. You're supposed to be 4 moves ahead of the media. You're not supposed to be waiting for a conglomeration of people to tell you, maybe you should play Jaden Ivey a little bit more. Maybe he'll score 25 points. And you're like, well, now you got a problem, cuz we'll talk about it in the coming weeks. You got 2 dominant ball guys that need the basketball in Cade Cunningham and Jaden Ivey. Does that work? We'll see if that works moving forward with two guys that got to be high volume shooters. So it's unfortunate. You don't sense eliteness. You sense averageness. And we don't like that here at the Detroit Sports Podcast Network. Ugh, we got to figure out something to cleanse our palate from that discussion. But in the end, we'll see what happens moving forward. They are a little more entertaining. The Clippers game was more fun to watch. At least it's a change. At least it's not the same guys that slump in the fourth quarter. It's a whole new guy, a whole new crew of guys that slump in the fourth quarter. So we'll see how this progresses moving forward. They've been a little more competitive, got a couple more wins, but in the end, it's just unloading, B-level players or less and getting back B-level players or less. So we'll see what free agency will bring, who's going to get overpaid to come play with Cade Cunningham. Make sure you follow Adam on Twitter at AdamRSGROZ. Follow the network at Detroit Podcast, anywhere at all that you find and listen to your favorite audio content. Type in these 3 words, Detroit Sports Podcast, and our content will find you. Podcasts are so fun to do. They're blowing up all over the place. And if you didn't know, we don't like to, shout out the competition, but Joe Rogan and Spotify have unlocked their exclusiveness, and Joe Rogan is back on Apple Podcasts. You know what that means? You can listen to Aaron Rodgers talk crazy. You can listen to Hulk Hogan bloviate on some things that maybe are truthful or maybe not. So you can go back and listen to the entire archive of the things you missed for the last couple years via Apple Podcasts. And while you're listening to that, if you're in the mood for sports, hit the Detroit Sports Podcast, like and review. Make sure you tell one other person. And that's how we've been around for the last 10 years, going on 11, broadcasting and covering the Detroit sports scene. Thanks, everybody. I look forward to catching up again next week with Adam from a sunnier situation. We'll talk about that next week on the latest edition of Doc and Jock.